Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Galaxy Brain Teamfight Tactics. I am Doe, of course, and with me today is a very special guest. It is none other than MismatchedSocks. Thanks for coming on the show. It was a good weekend for you in the first half of the North American regional qualifiers, or regional finals, whatever you want to call them, but you did well, didn't you?
Yeah, it was actually a really good weekend. Day one was a little bit stressful, but I think I
Hmm.
really brought it back day two.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely better results on day two. I just want to get your first of all, I guess we should back up. I just want to dive into the meta and everything immediately. But for those who don't know you, and if you're into TFT and you don't know who Mismatched Socks is, you've probably been living under a rock or something like that. You've been a big name in the scene for a long time. But why don't you go ahead and give us kind of your background in competitive gaming? Like what in your gaming history led you to be competitive in TFT?
1 second, hold on. I'm eating a cough drop, but
Okay.
I'm thinking. While I get this cough drop, let me think about it.
Uh-huh.
Um, I mean, I played a lot of games when I was actually very young. I started off playing a board game called Go
Oh, okay,
when I
cool.
was around 6 or 7, and I was able to get what you can call maybe the equivalent rank of challenger at a very young age of I think maybe 9 or 10.
Wow.
So
Neat.
and then But Go is actually a very complex game. It's probably far more complex than TFT will ever get to. And through the learning of Go, I actually learned how to properly learn how to learn.
Hmm.
So when it comes to like strategy games that require you to learn um, how to learn the game, I became very good at it. And essentially, that's why I'm very good at TFT.
Okay, so you have basically like a process for analyzing game systems, realizing what's the most effective way to win them, and that just tends to work for you, huh?
Yeah, I think so. I think about the game in a quite a different, quite differently than a lot of different other people. So
Okay,
I'll see.
cool. All right, so today we've got a couple of your tournament games from this last weekend to watch. Again, these are going to be games from the TFT North America Finals or North America Regionals, whatever you want to call them. But it's a tournament that gets you qualified for Set 4 Worlds. So they're big. These are big games. These are high pressure matches. Do you feel any more pressure when you're in these kind of tournament situations compared to just playing on the ladder? I would imagine there's a bit more, but how much is it? How much does it really affect you?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, a lot more pressure.
Hmm.
In fact, these tournaments are so stressful that I have been getting a severe lack of sleep
Oh wow.
because of these tournaments. Um, it is really high pressure, and honestly, because of the pressure, sometimes you play these games in a sort of Zen mode. Like,
Hmm.
like the pressure gets to you, and then you just go into like 30 minutes to 40 minutes of pure concentration. And then, of course, other times it's one of those games where like, oh, it doesn't matter, so I'm just not going to do anything. Like, I'm just going to play really sloppily.
Hmm.
But the games that do matter, you like hyper focus, and I think that's the big difference in the tournament setting.
Okay, cool. That's intriguing. I want to dive into a lot of that more, but maybe we can get into that a little bit during the games. I don't want to keep people waiting. I don't want to wait anymore. You ready to jump into game number one?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
All right. All right. Here we are getting into this was game two of day two, correct?
That is correct.
All right, cool. So, what are your thoughts kind of coming into this one? Thoughts about the players in the lobby, thoughts about your performance so far, just kind of general things going through your head as you attack the carousel here.
I actually thought day two, the player, I would say skill level is actually a lot lower than day one, so I was actually pretty confident going in.
Really?
I
Okay.
think a lot of the strong players actually dropped out day one, such as GBA and Soju.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked by a lot of those players going out. I mean, there were a lot of big names that went out on day two as well. But so it's interesting that you say that because it's you would think objectively the skill level would be higher because the people who perform the worst are gone, right, from day one. So would you say that some of these players, like obviously players like Soju have had good tournaments results, GV8 has in the past, although maybe not as much recently. Uh, but you still think of them as like super high level, even with a bad performance day like that.
Yeah, I still think the tournament's skill level was lower.
Okay.
I mean, I just think they had a bad day. A lot of times, day one could be the hardest because you don't really fully get the tournament meta on
Very
day
true.
one.
Yeah.
But on day two, you're like, okay, I got the hang of it. I'm like, I know exactly what to do from now on. It's that idea of powering up.
Right. Exactly. And that's, when I talk about you on the cast, that's one thing I say a lot is I feel like when we watch you play both like ladder wise and tournament wise, like the longer the event is, the better you get. It feel like sometimes you do need to kind of like ramp up in terms of your performance on either patches or in tournaments?
Well, I mean, kind of. In a sense, it's that like Zen mode I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Basically, the idea is like day one, you don't have to use your Zen energy bar yet, right? Because
Right.
it's like most of the times day one's kind of free. So you're taking it essentially like really relaxed, unless you need to super try hard. So unless I'm forced to try hard, I tend to play like day one and two pretty sloppily.
Okay, that makes sense. It is interesting that you mentioned the tournament meta as well, because I think that's one thing that a lot of people forget or don't realize until they're in the thick of it. Where the way the game is played in tournaments, the compositions people choose to run, the plans that go into that people come into the event with, it's very very different than how you would approach the ladder. Do you want to describe that a little bit more? Like what's different between ladder and tournaments for people that might not have thought of that before?
Well, on ladder, a lot of times you're actually not punished for greeting,
Hmm.
and in fact, probably the strongest players tend to greet a lot on ladder. So open forwarding is very common. Not rolling on seven and fascinating every game is super common.
Yeah,
Um, you know, not leveling 2-1 right here is very common. In this case, I level on 2-1 because I realized in a tournament I can't greet like that.
yeah. And this is a pretty strong start overall. You've got sharpshooter going, you've got cultist going. It really feels like cultist is probably one of the strongest early boards, very early boards rather, you can put together. But you've already built a Zeeks, so you're kind of known for slamming just very like good aura items, stuff that's going to be useful pretty much no matter what you're playing. So you've got Zeeks and a bow. Are you already kind of leaning towards Kale, or are you saying I'm just going to slam these items because they're strong and I'll figure out what comes next when I get there?
I'm definitely leaning towards KL because of the Zeeks.
Right.
Zeeks is actually a lot stronger on KL than I would say almost any other comp.
Mm-hmm.
KL is just one of those units that can use attack speed really well. Compared to something Zeeks on maybe Slayers, it's not very strong. So slamming the Zeeks makes me want to go towards Slayers for sure.
Okay. So just talking about like comps in general right now, there was a big shift between day one and day two, I thought. And maybe it's just bias from the games I happen to be casting because I know there were other games going on at the same time, obviously. But weirdly enough, all three games that I casted, which were some of the last three games of the day, were all won by keeper comps. So coming into day number two, it seems like people saw keeper comps in day one. The keeper comps didn't perform super well, but it felt like for whatever reason, a lot more people were trying them on day two and finding success. Uh, how do you feel like the meta shifted from day one to day two? Do you kind of identify that same thing with keepers? What else did you kind of notice?
Mm, I'm not super sure. I don't think keepers were really prevalent day two, to be honest. I
Okay,
think it was just a fluke that you saw a lot of keepers.
okay, that's what I
I
was
think
wondering if it
keepers
was maybe just the
were,
games I happen to be casting. You know?
yeah, but I mean, keepers are definitely strong. They're really good against both Slayer and KL, which
Mm-hmm.
is like a really big advantage. Because I would say that from day one, there was probably a lot more Slayer players.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So then day two, people might try to play keepers to counter it, but I don't think the keepers were actually that prevalent.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, it might just be the game bias, you know. Like, unfortunately, with these events, there's a lot more games going on than what we're able to show on stream, and like, you can only cast one game at once, so it was weird. We were remarking about that on the cast too. That was strange to do three keeper wins in a row. That was wild, but the comp was fun, so I don't mind it. I want to talk just a little bit more about the meta before we really dive into what's going on in this game in particular. But we saw players like Aegon just kind of purely relying on reroll comps. So there was Tristana mostly, some mages. What do you think about reroll comps right now in the meta? Do you feel like that's something that more people can start to bring to the tournament next weekend, or do you feel like it's kind of a fluke and people are going to just be more ready for it? They're maybe taking unawares. Like, what do you think?
I mean, I think the cat's out of the bag at this point, with Aegon's performance.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's pretty clear and it's very, very, very obvious that the Spirit Sharpshooter comp that Aegon plays is S plus 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 tier right now. I mean, it's
Definitely seems that
the
way.
difference between that comp and the second best comp, which is maybe Slayers. It's so big. The gap is so massive that it's actually crazy.
How many people can it support in a lobby?
It can definitely support two with these, but I mean, the problem with supporting two is that the two people need to not be forcing it. So if
Right.
it's like two open forters, then it cannot support two. But if it's two people that hit Sharpshooter Tristana, it can absolutely support two.
See, I feel
But
like it's. Oh, go ahead.
the comp is beyond broken. I mean, if possible, I would love a hotfix before the next tournament, but
Oh,
I don't think
spicy.
Riot's actually doing it. I
Yeah,
think the comp is very broken.
I'd be surprised. Do you feel like it's kind of something similar to the way like Mech Infiltrator was back in the day, where it's very forceable if only one person is forcing it? If two people try to force it, like you said, it doesn't really sustain that, and then both kind of hold hands down in 7 and 8. So does someone have to kind of like bite the bullet and hold hands with Aegon to try to like take him down with them, or like how do people
No,
approach this?
I don't think it's similar to Mech Infiltrator at all. I think it's
Okay.
very similar to pre-nerf Set 3 Zai Shredder. It's very, very
Okay.
similar.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
Basically,
see that.
yeah, a lot of people can play Shredder if a lot of people start with multiple Zayas, and then it's just the same thing. Like if you
Hmm.
start with like multiple Strasans, you just play this comp. It's super free.
Okay. Interesting. Well, let's move away from the general meta talk and talk a bit more about this particular game. So, you've managed to maintain all 100 of your hit points thus far in the game. Not a big surprise with the start you had with keepers. You've got a little bit of, or not keepers, with the cultist start. You do have keepers in there as well with the Jarvan, and you're kind of angling towards the ability to maybe include Dragon Soul if you want to. Although it feels like what you're kind of angling towards here is six keeper, is or not. I keep saying keepers. I meant to say six cultist. Is that kind of what you're thinking here?
Yeah, I mean definitely holding every single cultist I can find for sure. I think I'm like either one off or two off cultists right now.
Yeah.
It's actually really easy to slot in six cultists right now because you only need to find I think Callista or Sivir, or I think either of them if you have the chosen cultist. So
Right.
I'm
It's a lot
definitely angling to
easier.
pick 6. Hmm.
It's a lot easier having two 3 cost cultists instead of two 4 cost cultists for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Picking up the Akali as well. And is that a situation where you just would want to include that possibly if you swap in the Pike as one of your cultists?
Well, I mean, right now, okay. To give a general thought, I know for
Yeah.
sure that this game I'm gonna win streak. I'm waiting for the six cultists to show up, and then at this point, I'm trying to establish a main carry. So right now I'm playing Sivir
Hmm.
because I'm playing Sivir and Tristana, but later the main carry could be Akali, could be.
If you get
So
like
right
another
now I'm
bow
still
or something.
undecided.
Yeah.
Well, not maybe not another bow, but let's just say I get dropped an Infinity Edge. I might be in a
Hmm.
situation where I want to slam it.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Now, IE doesn't work. It's not as great in Kale, but it does work. There you go. There's the. Do you have 6 cultists now? I think you do. If you
I do
want
have
to.
six
Yeah.
cultists if I want to. And then at this point, I decide to sell the Akali. I mean, the
Mm.
Akali is kind of iffy, but usually Akali is something you want to play with a 2-star pike.
Yeah. And I suppose
But I
if
mean, at
you're.
this,
Oh, go ahead.
anyways, like I said, at this point, my whole goal is to try to get like a main carry, uh, start setting me up for a main carry, and then to just give some general thoughts about like how I'm approaching this game.
Yeah.
For itemization, the first item I built is a locket. Not a locket, I built a Zeeks.
Hmm.
So now my priority is to make three core items for your carry. Basically, the idea is like instead of building more lockets and more Zeeks and more chalices, now I want to focus on building three items for my carry.
Hmm. Right.
So that's my idea. And then here, I slam a duelist bat. And then the idea is that, yes, I'm trying to play towards Kale. However, I also have Tryndamere carry in the back of my mind. Tryndamere carry is really easy to slot into Cultist. So in this case, I want to flex between the two. And I realized that Duelist Bat is good in both Kale and Tryndamere.
Right.
Hence, I just slam it right away.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, Duelist Kale, like you said, those are both quite strong. Oh, interesting. Ramkev with the Vagar. Like, I don't think this is one of the games that we did on stream, if I recall correctly. Um,
I don't think so.
or at least it is. It's not one I remember, but that's interesting. So some players have been kind of re-rolling the mage on the Vagar side to get a little bit of a buff, but I believe he's still bugged a little bit, where sometimes one of his shots just doesn't happen. So I'm like really afraid to play Vagar right now.
Yeah, I mean, Vigor is definitely not awful, but you'd rather just play a 1-star Aurelion Soul, so.
Yeah, true
I
enough.
mean, that just puts into perspective either how weak Vigor is or how strong Aurelion Soul is.
Sometimes if I've had him from like the very early game and I've built a ton of stacks on him, I feel like a little bit bad swapping it out. But like you said, most of the time you get that 1-star Aurelion Soul and you're like, all right, well, this guy's just gonna blow things up faster. So you got 6 cultists in. So you're kind of on you're a little bit on cruise control right now. So it's just a matter of saving up gold, getting ready to are you gonna search for the Kale at 8 then basically? Because with this you can probably fast 8, can't you?
Yeah, I definitely want to. Actually, I go try to go into every single game with the intent of fast aiding.
Okay.
Um, just because I think that's probably the safest way to play, actually,
Hmm.
surprisingly. And then I want to briefly describe what I'm thinking about right now. Basically, um, it probably looks like I'm in a really good position, but a lot of times when you're in the lead like this, you're probably not gonna get the optimal items, so you're
Hmm.
probably gonna have to start adapting your items on the fly. So it's actually probably not that good, especially if I lose in the next few rounds.
Well,
And the
you're
amount of money I have is actually not that high either. So
yeah. I just looked at that. It's actually is a well. It's okay. I mean, if you are looking at going to 7 without rolling down too much, or rolling below 50 gold anyway, then
yeah, it's
8
okay.
soon afterwards. Yeah.
hmm I
Yeah.
think it's okay.
All
But
right.
I think overall, this spot is actually not unlosable. It's definitely not that high roll.
Mhm.
It's definitely a high roll, but it's not that high roll. So
Well, you're
I think the
missing
spot's
you're
okay.
missing some of the important 2 stars. Like you didn't find a 2 star Sivir, you didn't hit a 2 star Vlad. So I can see why at this point you'd be like, all right, I'm doing okay, but you start to get a little bit worried because you know you're probably going to run into some strong boards in the next few rounds.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that if the idea is like right now I have a spare sword, I have a spare rod. What's the next item I can make? Earlier, you know how I was talking about trying to avoid making more aura items because I
Mm,
already have one, and I'm trying to dedicate the remaining items towards carry items.
right.
With a rod and a sword, it could be hard to get a carry item on the carousel actually, because I mean, there's actually not that many options if you think about it. So
Yeah, because you're usually looking at getting defensive items if you're super IHP on a carousel, because usually all the
yeah,
offensive items are gone, right? So you'd be looking at like a bow for Ginsu's or something else like that. Something you're
yeah, actually,
probably not going to get.
well, no, when I saw this
Oh
carousel, I
wow,
was actually really sad because
really?
I don't want to bow for Ginsus. Usually when you
Oh
have dual
okay.
spat, more attack speed is redundant.
Oh yeah, it's a good
Right?
point.
It's the idea of how you want to build your kale.
Hmm. That's a very good point.
And
I forgot.
I probably get a bow regardless here, but it's
Hmm.
the idea of how you want to build your kale, which is if you have duelist bat and Gwynsus, you're playing super late game scaling kale, right? So
Yeah.
in that case, you want a super strong front line.
Well, that's a really good point. I had forgotten you built the duelist spat on the Sivir, so yeah, the Ginsu's is a little bit redundant at that point.
No, even without the duelist bat,
Huh.
the things that I'm thinking about right now is like, do I want to play front loaded kale or back loaded kale?
Hmm.
Like even without the duelist bat, basically back loaded kale requires you to have actual a decent amount of front line, but front loaded kale allows you to play essentially full damage, like a full damage team. So like from the spot, there's no way I'd actually want to play a backloaded KL because I probably don't have any front loaded. I don't have any way to actually generate a decent front line.
Hmm. Right.
And in a similar sense, I don't want to play a backloaded silver carry or a backloaded Callista carry.
Hmm.
So that's essentially what I'm trying to think of when I'm trying to balance my items.
Okay. Interesting. So when you play Kale, do you prefer to go for more of the adept sort of base front line, or do you like to? I suppose everybody likes to work in the 2 vanguards, but how do you usually like to build a front line around your
I like
Kale
to
builds?
play a depth front line, and I like to
Okay.
forsake. I like to do all front loaded damage. And
Hmm.
so basically, the idea is using the depth slow and then using the front loaded damage um, build, I'm actually able to burst down most comps before they can respond.
Right.
A lot of times the dev will buy you enough time to actually manage that. So
We should probably just go through like what exactly entails front loaded and back loaded Kale builds. So why don't you go ahead and break that down?
yeah, okay. So basically the idea is like any build of Gunsus like essentially means that you don't really get values from Gunsus until I would say like 10 or 15 seconds into the fight, right?
Hmm.
So your whole idea is that like, oh, okay, um, a lot of times the fight's decided within 5 to 10 seconds, I would say. So for your Gunsis to actually get value, you have to make sure that the fight's not decided until like 10 to 15 seconds into the fight.
Right.
So how do you actually do that? Well, usually you buy time with a bunch of AoE in Sejuani and Aatrox.
Right.
But let's just say instead of playing Gunsis, you play what is that spell crit? Draw Gauntlet Kale. Right
Okay.
off the
Yeah.
bat, your first few attacks can immediately start critting, even if the unit is not low HP. And a lot of times you might be able to actually deal a meaningful amount of damage to actually determine the fight within the first 5 seconds.
Right.
With let's just say you have a very strong what is the kindred? You can actually burst down a key unit before the fight even begins.
So
So
that's where the adepts come in a lot more handy because they're going to slow down the incoming damage then. And then ideally, by the time the adept debuff starts to fade away, you'll have killed a couple important things.
yeah, and that's
Yeah.
the whole essentially like tricky part about playing Kale.
All right, cool. I think because the thing is I don't think a lot of people realize
Actually, I mean,
that there's
I
two
was gonna
kind of
say,
very different methods of playing Kale. But let's let that go for a second. And I want to know what you're thinking about these items right now.
yeah, I was gonna say this is a great time to maybe pause the game for a little
Yeah,
bit and then
let's do
talk about
that.
the items.
All right, so I will pause right now.
Okay, so at this point, this is very very hard because I just got dropped 4 offensive items.
Yeah,
So right off the bat, the things that I'm going through my head is immediately I need to play full offensive, not full offensive Kale, but I need to play front loaded Kale.
hmm,
I need to make sure that I don't build items like Rage Blade on my Kale. I
right,
don't even build stuff like RFC on my Kale because RFC is usually not relevant until like 10 or 15 seconds into the fight.
right,
So at this point, I'm trying to build items that make an impact probably first 10 seconds. So immediately I'm thinking items like QSS, items like Giant Slayer. Giant Slayer is not very commonly built on Kale, but Giant Slayer allows you to essentially burst down the front line very, very fast.
right.
So items like those.
Well,
And
and
those
you
are
you
probably
know
the two items.
there's a brawler player in your lobby too, so that becomes doubly important then.
That probably wasn't what was crossing my mind, but
Sure.
I
Okay.
mean,
I mean,
if
they
so,
got
that
a
was
lot of
just an
HP,
added
man. I
bonus.
don't know.
That was probably just an added bonus if there
Sure.
was.
All
So
right.
for sure, I'm looking at the items right now, and I have to slam QSS and Giant Slayer for sure. And then the rest of the items, I really want to make towards defensive items, I think.
Hmm.
And then at this point, I still need a damage carry. So in my mind, I'm still struggling to think of a damage carry.
Okay.
And then finally, the last point is Yone. So I get a Yone,
Yeah.
which means I don't need essentially Shred anymore. So a lot of the things, let's just say if I were to play Kale, a lot of times you need to be able to go through the front line very, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
But Kale is actually very bad at dealing damage to frontliners. As a result, things like Giant Slayer becomes not very valuable. But the
Right.
moment you get a Yone, that changes the equation a lot. Giant Slayer becomes one of the best items again. So because I got this Yone, I like instinctively know what I need to do to win this game.
Cool. All right. Well, let's see you do it. You ready to unpause?
Yeah.
All right. Three, two, one. Unpause. Okay. So you got the Yone. So now at this point, it's just kind of nice to have the Yone in there. You're still waiting to get to level 8, do that roll down. What level do you prefer right now to go to 8 and roll down? Is it still 4-3, the traditional round, or do you do it a little bit differently sometimes?
Yeah, it's the round after the carousel, right? So 4-5.
4-5, right? Okay.
And yeah, this Yone is really important because essentially it's giving shred to my team, which really really struggles to kill frontliners right now.
Hmm. That makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. And this does help a lot against, well, I mentioned brawlers before, but even things like, keepers and stuff, just to get things out of the way, avoid the CC coming in. That was a close round. Wow. All right.
Yeah, I'm actually decently strong. I'm not super super strong, so I'm gonna start losing HP soon for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually gonna be very hard to stabilize, even with this board. Um,
Do you,
so we'll
do you
see.
feel like sometimes when you are going towards this type of thing, when you're thinking kale super hard, do you feel like you're really reliant on hitting that kale? I mean, because if you don't, like, what do you build into this if you don't hit it? Do you go for like a Sivir kind of thing instead, or what's your backup plan here?
If I mean, in this case, I actually have a lot of options, right? Even though I
Mm,
slammed these items thinking Kale, for sure I can play Tryndamere, I can play Olaf.
mm,
Without a doubt, I can play almost four costs in the game. I can play Talon if I wanted to.
true.
So I'm not all in by any means, but like, yeah, I do prefer to play Kale here.
Okay, cool. All right, so a couple more rounds is all you need to do, and
Yeah, and then I think okay, actually, at this point, I'm already thinking about my transition to Kale. I know that for sure because I actually, with 20 gold left on level 8, it's not a lot, but it's okay. And it's an okay amount to force a comp.
okay.
Um, like, my metric is about, like, if you have about 10 gold left after you level, it's probably okay to force a comp
Oh,
at
okay.
stage 5. So,
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I had at least in. So I mean, like I'm almost guaranteed to go KO at this point because like you're Lee Sin's one of the best units I can put into a KO comp. So
Yeah.
like I'm very committed right now. So I'm thinking of how to like maximize my econ while getting um all my KO units.
Now, why not pick up the Zaya here? Being that she's one of the executioners. I mean, obviously Kindred is going to be out there at some point too. But do you just want to maintain the economy, stay above 20, and you can kind of assume to find another Zaya later? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, and Zai's just not a strong unit right now. I would say in the kill build.
She's a synergy bot for sure.
Yeah,
If
she's
you
not
if
very
you
good.
include her, would you say it's not even worth it to include her?
Yeah, it's probably not even worth it to include her for the most part.
Okay, interesting. Because when I look at, so would you say you find a lot of situations where you only go two executioner then?
Yeah, two. I think two executioners is good. I mean, I think 2, 3, and 4 are all good. It's just really hard to justify playing Kindred ever.
Mm-hmm.
She offers you no front loaded damage, no back loaded damage, really weak AOE damage. Um, she's
So,
essentially just a really bad unit in the comp.
so you don't
So
necessarily even worry about the executioner trait at all if you're really thinking about Kale in this sort of situation.
yeah,
You're
it's just
just
the unit quality is so low.
yeah.
Kindred. I mean, in my opinion, Zai's one of those units. Either you put 3 items on her,
Okay,
or you don't play her at all.
interesting. Because I,
Anyways,
the funny thing is that like I recall as I was going through because I every day I go through and I look at all the comps that all the players play that make it to the next day, and I did notice a trend that players that played three, oh, and there's a Kale, players that played three executioner versus four executioner finished in much worse spots. It feels like you kind of have to get the executioner chosen if you're going to go that direction. Does that sound right?
anyways, yeah, it does. But we should probably not talk about this during the roll down. I
Sure.
recommend maybe backing it up a little
All
bit
right, sure.
because this roll down is actually quite insane.
All right, well, let's go back a moment
Let's
then.
go back right before the carousel, maybe.
All right, where is
So this roll down is actually quite insane because I actually planned. I remember planning out the entire roll down in my head before even getting here.
All right, so give me a timestamp here.
I think your timestamp here is fine. I'll just watch it on your screen. Right now I can see everything properly.
Okay. All right.
Oh, I can see everything properly now. We can
Oh,
just use
good.
your screen.
All right. Yeah, we usually behind the scenes fact for all of you out there. We usually use
Okay, but
Discord as
anyways,
screen share. But yeah, go ahead.
before this roll down, I already know I'm gonna transition on 4-5. I know exactly what I'm looking for. Um, I know that one of the key items you want in a comp right now is Morello, um, because Morello cuts down the effectiveness of Slayers by a huge amount. The
Mm-hmm.
other item I'm looking for sure is blue buff. So I was looking for those two for sure. I'm not looking for any more KO items. I already have 3: Duelist Bat, Giant Slayer, QSS.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking for utility items only, and blue buff for Lee Sin and Morello for Yone.
Right. Okay. Because those are
And then
sort of. Oh, go ahead.
on the carousel, I think I get very lucky and end up getting a Morello for Yone. But belt and tier are actually very uncontested items, so I had a high chance of getting one or the other.
Oh yeah. At this point in the meta, people aren't really going for those unless they're doing exactly what you're talking about, where they're finishing a Morello's a lot of times or a blue buff. But here's a carousel. Still last pick because your HP
Okay,
is still
so
very high.
I'm staring at my board. I'm staring. I already know exactly what item I want, but I'm staring at my board and I'm trying to pinpoint exactly what units to sell. So the moment carousel ends, I immediately start selling those units, and it's like a very very fast motion. So right off the bat, I know exactly what units I'm going to sell. It's going to be I think Elise, Sivir, Callista, um, and Pike for sure. So I think I sell those units exactly. Oh, and Vladimir.
Okay. Yeah. So just
And I immediately my next goal is to immediately find a relevant chosen, and then with the remaining time, put in the strongest boards I can. And I want to guarantee give myself 20 seconds to do everything.
and that's huge that you found the Kale right off the bat like that. It takes a weight off your shoulders anyway.
But this actually puts a wrench in my plan. The
Right,
the
the
lucky
lantern.
lantern.
Yeah, more
But
to
if you
think about.
just watch this transition, is actually very clean.
Yeah, you get 4 divine in there extremely quickly. Able to add in 2 spirit, get the right items on everybody or items in place. You even got to a position really well. Got the locket on Jarvan. Wow,
So you see
two
how
mystic even, dude. That was clean.
I barely ran out of time and I was able to put items on everyone.
Yeah.
I think the big problem with every single player's transition is that they spent too much time rolling for their units. That fight, I think I had 15 seconds to actually scrap together a decent board. If I
Mhm.
spent even maybe one more second rolling, I wouldn't be able to put in a strong enough board to actually win this fight. But giving myself the optimal amount of time to actually do this transition and putting in a strong together team and not put items on the units at the beginning of the fight, have them
Mhm.
on before the fight even starts, makes a humongous difference.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you have multiple aura items to place, you kind of have to do it in advance. But it seemed like when you hit the divine Irelia, that sort of put you in a position where it's like, all right, I know exactly what I need to put in at this point.
Well, no, I definitely didn't. I mean,
Really?
I didn't
Okay.
even realize it was Divine Aurelia. I kind of just realized,
Oh.
oh, I'll take anything.
All right.
If it's even remotely relevant, I would have taken almost anything. Like
Huh.
Spirit Kindred or like Spirit Yumi would have taken almost anything, or like almost any single Vanguard. The whole idea is anything relevant, immediately put together a relevant team,
Hmm.
and it's just try to transition, go go go.
And are you're
No time
thinking?
wasted.
Are you thinking relevant in terms of what's going to be a stable board, or relevant in terms of what's going to contribute to the kill count at that point?
I'm just talking about relevant for that round. So any two-star
Okay.
unit essentially.
Yeah, just
It could have been
stabilize.
almost any two-star unit at that during that stage.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. How do you feel about the lobby strength overall right now in this game?
The lobby is actually definitely not weak. So I mean, I did get some lucky wins, but this is a pretty strong board for stage four. But even now, with okay, I still pre-transition because I know that the next few rounds are going to be super important.
Hmm.
So I'm not trying to waste. I'm not trying to waste a single round having a weak board.
Yeah.
So I'm pre-transitioning everything.
Because that's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Because I think a lot of people would have just been content to sit on 4 divine for a while and be like, "Well, I've got 4 divine and I've got good kale items. Let's cross our fingers and make sure it works." Right?
No, no, but right now I can't. I can't just sit because I
Exactly.
have, I have 8 one-star units on the board, so I need to roll. And if I need to roll, I might as well just sell my chosens and stuff as well.
Yeah, like I was saying, I think that's something that separates you from a lot of other players because I feel like I've seen a lot of other players just be like, "Well, it's chosen Aurelia. That's pretty good. I don't want to take the risk at not finding anything better than that." You know?
Well, no, I'm the person to not take any risks.
Whoa,
But
that
yeah,
helps.
I had to roll there a little bit,
A little bit,
but
yeah.
I mean, the thing is that like even with this, I mean, at the moment I hit that, that was a high roll for sure. But
Mm.
prior to hitting that divine kill, it was very, very, very possible to actually bot for there.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, it was a very average game, and it was a very average rolldown
I
up
mean,
until
it
that
definitely
point as
wasn't
far as
average, but
quality. But
it
well,
definitely wasn't average. But what I'm trying to say was there like I was nowhere near out of the woods until I hit that kill. So,
mm,
but being this healthy, even if I don't hit a kill right now, I can probably guarantee myself a top six, and that's probably the best I can do if I don't hit.
I mean, it seems like right now you got to be thinking like, okay, how can I get a first? Are you
Yeah,
still?
right now I'm getting a
Yeah,
first.
yeah,
And then
exactly.
actually, you see right there, I sold a zillion and 2 orns.
Hmm.
If I hit an orn, I play it for sure, right? But the problem is that right now my board is missing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 upgrades. So I actually cannot hold units on the bench until I hit these upgrades. So that's what's going on in my mind right now.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense. Well,
then
there's one. That's a big one.
let's also talk about the Kale build, which is remember how earlier we were talking about front loaded damage versus back loaded damage?
Hmm.
My kill is very, very clearly front loaded damage. I have a Ludens Echo for my Kindred, which helps front loaded damage as well.
Right.
So my goal is to how can I optimize this kill's front loaded damage, right? And you'll see that eventually I go through this debate whether it's actually better to play 4 divine or to play 4 executioner.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people would lean towards 4 executioner just because the tooltip says you crit below 99% health, right? So a lot of times it's only that first hit that doesn't crit. But that said, 4 divine just gives so much more survivability and a lot of true damage as well to the kale, which I see the debate happening. What are you thinking about? Talk me through this process.
Yeah, I mean this is actually a really hard one. I would say
Yeah.
in 90% of the times it's correct to play 4 executioner. In
Okay.
90% of the times, but I think this is actually one of those special scenarios. The whole debate is, well, for sure for sure divine is stronger in the 6 seconds where it's relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And without a doubt, but it's mathematically way stronger. But outside of those 6 seconds, um, what's it called? Execution is way stronger, right?
Yeah.
So the argument is is it more relevant to be strong in those 6 seconds, or is it more relevant to be strong in a fight?
Do you
Like
do you think
outside that fight.
the duelist spatula inclusion affects your decision at all? Because in the amount of time it takes for the duelist to really start ramping up with attack speed is about the same amount of time it takes for divine to be activated. So you're starting to get that speed right when divine turns on. Does that make a difference?
No, that does make sense. That does make sense. But in this case, even if I had something like a Jewel Gauntlet, I still think the same argument can be applied. Let's just say I don't have Duelist Bat, and
Okay.
let's just say I have to have Jewel Gauntlet. Basically, the argument is it more relevant for those 6 seconds of Divine versus more crit throughout the entire fight? And in most cases, I would say like 90% of the cases, the answer is for execution is better for sure. However, if you look at my build and you look at my team comp, it is way more relevant that I kill units in those 6 seconds than try to prolong a fight.
Right.
And that's essentially when I realized that yeah, Fort Divine is way more value here.
Okay. So you grab the Ginsus off the carousel. Now you do have two removers as well. So what are you thinking about with this one?
I can't remember what the other items were, but I would never put Gunsys on kill here. Like
Yeah.
I would never even think about it.
Okay, that's what I was curious about. Because you mentioned
Yeah.
you mentioned you wouldn't before because obviously it's the speed overkill, but then grabbing one from the carousel, I was kind of wondering. But going on to the Lee
Yeah.
Sin instead, is there a scenario where you're kind of thinking about four duelist here?
I definitely would think about for duelist. I mean, it's not something I can fit in right now, but it's something
Mm.
I'm thinking about for sure.
All
And
right.
anyway, see how
Oh
I put
wow.
in the Strax and I actually sold the Zaya, and that's when I like actually made the full realization. So, and
Okay.
then from now on, like I never even think about executions for the rest of the game because I know that like my instincts has to be right and Fort Divine has to be stronger.
Yeah, four divine, and then if you can, four duelist. We'll see if you put it in. I have no idea actually. But so, what was it that finally pushed the decision over the edge as far as going for four divine?
I mean, I just thought about it with my itemization. It has to make sense like this. I mean, I thought about it. I also tried both, and I was watching the fight,
Mm-hmm.
and I realized that those 6 seconds of divine is way more impactful.
So I was just about to ask. So I asked what really pushed you over the edge to choose divine. You said you've been looking at the damage, and a variety of factors. But now one thing I've noticed is that I feel like I haven't seen a ton of scouting going on. Is that just because you feel like you've rel value for sure? Do you feel like you've got a just a good handle on what's in the lobby and your general positioning towards it, or what's going on there with that? Because I feel like some other players I do see scout a little bit more.
I actually do think I was doing a lot of scouting.
Oh, okay.
So in this case, I think the rest of the game was smooth sailing. At this point, it's hard to not imagine getting it first.
Yeah, okay.
I'm scanning for like basic positioning and whether people are getting close to 3-starring their forecast units. And I think it's hard to just no more interesting decisions left in this game. Pretty much the rest of the game is just me dumpstering on the rest of the lobby.
All right.
So I mean, there's a few fights that were close, but I mean, with how strong my build is versus everyone, I think it's really hard to
we
lose.
can speed it up. We can go 1.5x normal speed
But
here.
yeah, I mean, I can just briefly talk about the matchups if I ever scout them. But like
Yeah, go for it.
against I think there was a brawler player which I always win against. There was a Slayer player, and Slayer traditionally does really bad into KL,
Uh-huh.
and Slayer especially does really bad into what's called front loaded KL because he can just burst down their Olaf and Trinamir.
Right.
There's I think a mage player which is really easy for me to beat. Um, Especially if that Veigar is relying on healing, which he is.
Yeah.
And a keeper player. Keepers are probably the hardest matchup for KL. Um, Especially if you don't have RC. So the keeper one's really rough.
Right. And so as far as this board goes, this is kind of interesting. A bit of a dragon soul thing going on, but it
Yeah,
seems like
he's
you can
actually
never
pretty
really.
strong.
Yeah.
He's actually pretty strong. But I mean, I think yeah, this fight should be close. But okay, he has a winning this one.
Oh,
But this is
interesting.
because I still have 52 gold in the bank. But
Yeah.
like eventually, the moment I actually use all the gold, it's impossible to lose against that board. I think.
And as far as you using the gold, is it's going to be generally for going to 9, I would imagine, or not?
Yeah, probably. I'm definitely probably going 9. Either adding in a zero or maybe a duelist. it's probably a duelist over executioner, so that's probably what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
makes
I end up
sense.
adding that glitch stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say
And
it
then
makes sense to add that 4 duelists in. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think anything should be even close from here on
All right.
outwards.
I'll
So
just
we can
speed it
just
up.
yeah, let's just speed it up and let's just call it next game.
Sure.
I think.
I'll say now, you are unlike any other guest we've had on the show. This is very like I've never had a guest before that's so down to business as far as going through
Oh,
things of a game. It's not
uh,
a criticism. It's not a criticism. It's
I'm
just
not
fun.
trying to watch. I'm not trying to watch. It's like watching like the end of a movie. You know, you
Yeah.
already know that the good guys are gonna win. I don't think there's anything
You
more
don't
to
like to
discuss.
soak in the emotion of the ending. You don't like to bask in the sort of like the victory won, that kind of thing.
I mean, sometimes, but in this case, there's nothing new to learn here.
You're just
So
like Death Star's blown up. GG, go next.
yeah, this game was actually pretty stressful. If you look in the camera, I was biting my lips and
Yeah.
started bleeding. So
Oh
that's
wow.
probably more interesting
Oh
than anything
wow.
else.
All right. So that's interesting because I mean that was a barely one round there, but it's so you really are feeling a lot of stress with these then too. Interesting.
Yeah, but in this game, eventually, I think I'm gonna win no matter what.
Okay.
Just because I have gold, I'm in level 9. Assuming they don't get super strong. There's yeah.
Yeah. I mean, part of it too is in a tournament situation like this, the first places are really meaningful, right? Because it can be used as a tiebreaker scenario sometimes, but also just it's a matter of an extra point over the second place person, and points come down to the wire so many times too.
Yeah, it is actually really stressful. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you felt like you were a little bit on like cruise control at this point, but did you really feel like you were on cruise control here?
Yeah. No, I was actually the rounds where I was definitely in 100% Zemo was stage 4, 5, and 5-1, and I think the rest of it was just kind of cruise control. But I
Okay.
mean, in hindsight, if I look at the board, Lisa is actually not very valuable against
Hmm.
the Saya player. I kind of wish I thought about it when I was playing the game.
What
I mean, he
change would you have
eventually.
made?
I mean, I'm not sure, but he eventually makes a positioning mistake. I think
Okay.
that allows my Lee to get a value.
Uh-huh.
I think last time I scouted his board, he actually puts two Azir soldiers in the corner.
Uh-huh.
So then, as a result, like I might as well take those items off of Lee Sin probably. Even
Okay.
though stereotypically blue buff and Glince is the strongest Lee Sin item stereotypically, but this blue buff is probably more value on something like Yumi,
Yeah.
and then the Glince is probably more valuable on I don't know. In this case, probably still Lee Sin, but
Probably still Lee
or
Sin, but
maybe in Azir too.
I do agree with the blue buff Yumi. That's definitely a lot stronger than people give her credit for. Wow, you just hit all the upgrades you needed right there too. But your
Yeah.
opponent, Goobums, is hitting a lot of the best. Like he's got a really strong keeper's board right now, but just seems like he can never
No.
quite reach the Kale.
I mean, yeah, keeper struggles with Kale if Kale has QSS usually,
Yeah.
but
It's what I'm saying is it's an objectively strong keeper board, but just not into this matchup in this particular situation.
if you position the Zai in front of the Kale, I still lose. So at this
Hmm.
point, it's just I'm making sure my Kale is on the opposite direction of his Zaya,
Yeah.
which is actually kind of tricky. But as long as my his Zaya doesn't reach my Kale, I never lose.
Well, what's interesting about the way Goobums is positioning too is that a lot of keeper players that are winning lobbies frontline the Zaya as this one's over. And we'll talk about that in a moment as we get back into the lobby. Did you feel threatened at all by the keeper board at the very end there?
I definitely felt a little bit threatened, but like I said earlier, as long as my Kale is not in front of the Zaya, I don't think I can lose. And since he has to move the whole clump, it's like very advantageous for me in terms of positioning. I should never be caught in a position where my Kale is directly in front of his Zaya.
Okay, interesting. So it really comes down to positioning with that, and you'd handle that pretty well. Okay, cool. All right, so we have another game to look at. This is going to be game 4, I believe, from that day,
No,
from
I think
day
this
2.
is game 3.
Game 3. Okay, game 3. And so we'll let's get into the game. Actually, let's stop talking about it. Let's just watch it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So here we are, the very next game. You just came off a win. Do you find like your mentality is sometimes polluted by good games as much as it is by bad games sometimes?
I'm not sure, but all I can remember was in day 2. I know that like if you average I think 5.5 or something like that or 5, you'll make it.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, oh, I need to try hard for one last game. Let me just put all my energy into this last game, and then I can just spend the rest of the day just chillaxing. That's what I was thinking.
And you were one of the lucky people that got the glove off of that carousel. There's a lot of tiers, but you got arguably the good item.
Yeah, it helps to get a good item, but tier's not terrible. It depends on what you get from it. Like I think tier's not the worst in my opinion.
What's the worst then right now? Belt?
I personally think cloak is the worst, but
Cloak.
oh,
Okay.
I think bow is the worst. I think bow is the worst, but
Bow is the
tier's not.
worst? Really?
I personally think so. Yeah, that's my
Huh.
opinion on it.
Wow. Okay. And why is that?
I think that tournament meta is really aggressive, and if you
Mhm.
end up getting something like an RFC at the beginning of the game, it's hard not to start the game with like 20 or 25 HP. It's
Okay.
really hard not to.
That's a good point. That's a good point because, a lot of people think of, all right, well, what item am I going to need multiples of in this composition that I want to try to go for, right? Because a lot of people have some semblance of what they want to go for before a game begins, and so it's like, well, if I need a lot of bows, I want to grab a bow at the carousel. But you're saying what you really want off the carousel is a component that can make you a strong item early.
Yeah, and then my playstyle, I like to fast 8 every single game.
Yeah.
So playing bow is like really unreliable. I can't just play a bow and expect to fast 8.
Well, so what are
That's just
what are
not
your
possible.
top three carousel items on the very first carousel then?
I mean, this is completely dependent on playstyle, right?
Sure, but for
But
you specifically.
I think sword is really good. Glove is really good. Rod is okay. I think those are probably my top 3.
Okay,
There's
interesting.
like at a huge amount
Oh
of gold too in this
wow.
game, so yeah, you remember this.
Yeah,
But
that's huge.
I mean, like I think my items were not very good, and it was kind of tragic. Or like
Well, you can
I don't
build an
remember.
IE, but that's about it.
I definitely don't know here for sure. I
Yeah.
think.
Oh, you do. You did
Yeah, I
IE.
mean without a
Wow.
doubt,
I
because
well, I'm surprised by that actually. Yeah.
well no, my goal is to fast save every game.
Sure,
If
sure.
I'm not slamming items, there's no way I can fast save.
That's
So
true. So you feel like you kind of just have to make the best thing you can, huh?
yeah, and then because I built an IE, I'm committed to try to win, right? So in this case, I level as well.
Right.
And essentially, I'm gambling on the fact that well, I slammed an item. Most people probably haven't slammed an item yet.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go ahead and just use that to my advantage and win the lobby to get my econ anyways.
Right. Interesting. All right. So IE, um, this can work in a good amount of different carries. A lot can benefit from it. What are you thinking mostly though? What works
Um,
best with Infinity Edge in your opinion right now?
Infinity, I think, is probably only good on Tryndamere and Talon,
Okay.
and then for everyone else, it's super mediocre. So yeah,
Okay.
I'm like pretty tunneled on playing Tryndamere, I think, right from this get go. But the good thing about tunneling on a comp, versus essentially like there's two methods of methodology of tunneling on a comp when you have a lot of gold is totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, I made 10 at 1-5, I think. I made 10 on the last creep round.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a lot of gold when it comes down to it, which means if I want to tunnel, I have the luxury to do so. The other time that you can tunnel is that when you have a start with an equals help, it's actually better to tunnel. So like in this case, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna play Tryndamere. I don't really give a shit what else, what other things.
Yeah.
Compared to maybe last game where I actually didn't have as much gold. In that case, I want to slam flexible items. So
Right. That's interesting. Okay. Because again, everybody kind of talks about flexibility in the meta, and you're known as a very flexible player. But from game to game, I suppose you're flexible in what comp you play. But in terms of actually being flexible within the trajectory of the game itself, sometimes, like you said, there's situations like this where you're really thinking one thing, and you are going to kind of tunnel and maybe play less flexible than you would normally.
yeah, I mean, for example, if I started with Hand of Justice instead of if I start with Hand of Justice and a sword, I would slam the Hodge for sure, right? But in this case, since I only had one choice, I
Right.
was just gonna be as strong as possible.
Okay, and then you might as well use that gold advantage to augment that maybe less than flexible flexible
Yeah.
choice in the Infinity
So I
Edge.
tunnel very hard. Yes. Yeah.
Right, makes sense. Now things have worked out pretty well. Like your board is really strong. You've got 3 good synergies online early, so you should feel pretty confident about win streaking. Although this round's going to be pretty rough. Yeah, never mind.
No, I mean,
Never
I
mind.
think I lose my win streak very quickly.
I was gonna
So,
say, yeah. Then the Galileo came in. Yep, that's
and
what
I
happens.
mean, I do remember this game definitely being a low roll when it comes to mid games. So
Okay.
even this opener is not very super. It's not actually super strong.
Now It's interesting because it does feel like we're back into a state of the game where items are going to go a lot farther than synergies are.
Yeah, but also when it comes to board strength, if you like, it's basically comes down to like your early board game strength comes down to how easily can you add in like maybe a fifth unit.
Hmm.
If you look at my sidebar, I have 1 out of 3 Dragon Soul, 1 out of 3 Cultist.
Right.
My level 5 is going to be extremely weak, going to be way, way, way weaker than everyone else, right? If you just think about it from a logical perspective,
Right. Right.
hence, this board is actually not that strong despite it looking strong on level 4. I would need to wait till maybe level 6 for this board to be very strong, but like intuitively, you know that you're not really keeping this Nibbly till level 6.
Hmm.
So like from this like basic example, you can already kind of understand where I'm thinking. Like, oh, I got my level 4 wins on stage 2, 2, 2, and what's it 2, 1, and 2, 2.
Hmm.
Now I'm gonna farm lose streak all the way till Krugs, and that's probably what I do.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense.
So, I mean, actually, this is actually one of the hard ones. One of the things that's actually really hard to explain. Like, like why is this board weak, but why is a board that looks very similar, maybe with like a Teemo strong instead of a Sivir?
Right,
That's
and I
one of the hardest
suppose
things to explain.
Timo not only does damage like Sivir does, but he also prevents the other team from doing damage with the blinds. So you
No,
get,
but also like he can add in a fifth unit that's relevant very easily.
right.
So like earlier, I had a choice of playing Sivir or Teemo. I think I had that choice. I'm almost 100% sure. I chose the Sivir to play a strong level 4 board. If I valued a strong level 5 board, I should choose the Teemo. And that's like the nuance of like that's like the skill demonstration and the nuance of like playing strong board.
Wow. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think I've had anyone as big brained as you on my show before. No, no,
Right here.
no
See right off the
shade to the
bat.
other pros I've had on, but man.
See right here, right off the bat. If I had the Teemo, I
Uh
could
huh.
put this Yumi for a very, very strong level 5 board.
Do you
Like
feel like
very,
you
very strong.
do you feel like you made
Right?
a mistake then not picking up the Timo?
No, I mean absolutely not. I made that
Okay.
decision a long time, like back in
So
like 2-2,
you
I think. I was
you
like, I'm
planned
gonna
on
sacrifice.
yeah you
Yeah,
planned on winning 4 and then losing during or losing level 5.
yeah, that was the whole plan. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. See, a lot of
I mean,
people.
I
Okay.
get a little bit unlucky here because Aegon's open 40, so I
Right.
actually end up winning this one. But I think he was the only person in the lobby I would actually win to, so that's a little bit unlucky.
And he's, Aegon traditionally is known for as an open forwarder back in like set 3 a lot. Didn't do it as much during set 4, but now set 4.5, and especially in this tournament, it seems like the Aegon of old is back once again. Uh, had you been kind of watching his playstyle throughout the day? Had you kind of known what he was going on so you could sort of anticipate this, or you're kind of like, okay, I just hope I don't hit him, and it was a little bit of bad fight RNG?
Oh, I mean, absolutely, I'm terrified of Aegon in tournaments. This guy is like, this guy is like everyone's biggest fear. He is unbelievable. I'm gonna be
He really
honest,
is.
like my whole plan going to day 3 is to avoid Aegon. Such is awesome. But
That's a good
I
plan,
have
actually.
I have copied his playstyle and hoping I can do pretty well with it.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well,
Also
I won't
here,
ask you about that much more because I don't want you to give anything away for next weekend. But that's interesting.
I sell the Nidalee because Infinity Edge is actually stronger than on a 1-star Sivir than 2-star Nidalee.
Yeah, that
So
makes
at this
sense.
point, not only is it transferring item to a stronger carry, it's also opening the option of having a better chosen. So
Right. You've also got that Sejuani early, which is kind of a nice pickup.
yeah, it's pretty lucky.
These items, though, tell me you get something
Yeah,
good
it's a
off the
little bit
scrub.
rough. It's a
Yeah.
little bit rough.
Oh no. All right. So
Not
now
that
what are you
bad.
thinking?
I mean, now I got this Nico's help. I'm definitely forcing. That's all I remember. I was like,
Mm.
oh, I'm 100% telling you on one comp. I'm only gonna build items to trim Mimir from now on.
Okay.
I have so much gold, so I can always hit. And now my goal is to fast 80 with the largest amount of gold possible, without sacrificing too much life.
Right. Because you've got 86, so you're okay, but it's if you lose a lot during stage 3, then you need to start being a little bit concerned.
Yeah, all I can remember was I remember the stage 3 fights being actually really unlucky
Hmm.
this game.
Well, let's find out.
Because my board is actually not that weak. Like this guy, I should probably kill, I would say 4 or 5 units. I think I end
Mm-hmm.
up killing almost none. I think, which
Hmm.
is ridiculous given how strong my board is. But
Yeah, it just seems like the Sivir damage never really got rolling back there. I suppose with our sharpshooter, she's not hitting more than one person, and all the other stuff like Sejuani, one ult, Jarvan, no items, like is just not going to do a ton of damage.
but in hindsight, if I can go back, I would. But in hindsight, I would definitely play the Vi over the maybe Janna because
Oh,
Silver needs
okay.
that shred, armor
Yeah,
shred.
that's true.
And for sure, my board here right here, all 1-star units I'm rolling for sure. I'm
Hmm.
rolling for anything that can stabilize me. I'm not looking at the scale even though I buy it, because Infinity Edge is not good on KL.
Hmm.
And of course, I buy the Sakali and I try to stabilize.
Okay. Yeah, and a collie with a IE is gonna be able to do a little bit, especially because it's simply just it's a 2-star. You know.
Oh yeah, also Infinity Edge is probably Kali's best item.
Hmm.
But actually, I remember this fight right here. My transition was really sloppy. I should have just sold the KL, clear my bench, clear my mind, sold the stuff like Kennen,
Yeah.
and then like just focus on my board. But instead of focusing on my board, I was actually spending too much time managing my bench. So I do remember this being super sloppy. Like I could have saved probably I would say 10 to 15 health if I transitioned properly.
Okay.
But
Do you find yourself having like big complicated benches a lot, or is this something where you generally just try to do like what you're saying and keep it really clean, keep the decision making to a minimum so you can focus on your board and focus on positioning and that kind of thing?
I try to keep the bench really clean if I can.
Okay.
But right now I'm definitely thinking of how to strengthen my board still because my board is actually really weak.
Hmm.
And I remember rolling once or twice, but I could have made my board a lot stronger if I bought that Garen and bought this Aatrox or put in this Aatrox, put in this Wukong. But I don't know why I was struggling so hard right here.
Hmm.
I think in this case I saw the Tryndamere. I was like, oh, I'm gonna buy it. Which unit should I sell from my bench so I can buy this?
Yeah.
And that's like what made the decision so complicated. Like
Right.
if I could,
Exactly.
yeah, if I just sold like all my units on the bench, it would have been so much easier. So a lot of mistakes here actually.
Hmm.
Costing me this fight, for example.
Yeah, and that's a big loss too. Like that's a good amount of HP that got drained away because of the fight going so one sided for a DQA there.
Yeah.
But you did find the Tryndamere. So
Yeah.
now, okay, so on this carousel, now you've got second choice, it looks like. So what are you thinking here as far as how you're going to make that transition into a board that stabilizes a bit?
When you have a Nico's help, it's actually really, 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 really good to roll on 3-3.
Hmm.
Because if you hit a Tryndamere, which I did, and you have another Tryndamere in the carousel, you can instantly just get a top 4 right here. Like, if that was like a Tryndamere on the carousel, I instantly top 4 no matter what item it was. So,
True.
which is why, if you have a Nico's help, often you want to roll on 3-3. But
Okay.
since there wasn't a Tryndamere, I wanted to build the best Tryndamere item I can build.
That's
Which,
okay. Sorry,
given the
that's just
carousel, was definitely QSS, I think.
that's really interesting. So you're saying, just to reiterate, go through it again. Yeah, and there's a nice Olaf find there. You're saying if you have a Nikos, roll on 3-3 to find a good 4 cost so that you have the chance of getting another one of that 4 cost on the carousel, which you can then immediately make into a 2-star much earlier than a lot of other people have.
Yeah, yeah, but that's just a free win, right? That's
Yeah.
I think most pro players probably do that as well. But
Okay.
that's just a free win technique. Like
I'm just a
if you have a
lowly
Nico,
master
you can
player,
just
so
you can cheese a free win like that. Yeah.
wow. All right. Interesting. I just wanted to go through that again because obviously most of our audience is like me. They're not as good at the game, but they want to be better. So those little tips, those little tidbits are gold, man.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it. I feel like the thing is that like I feel like it's intuitive once you explain it, but
Yeah.
people probably don't really think about it.
Yeah, totally. It makes total sense when you hear it. It's just not something you think about a lot during the game because you get into a little bit of a mindset. Again, speaking as like a Masters player, you get into a mindset where it's like, okay, this is just my general game flow, and this is just always the way it is. Rolling
Yeah.
on 3-2 sometimes, I'm rolling on 4-1 sometimes. Sometimes I'm going to 8, and then I'm rolling then at 4-5 or 5-1 or something. You have these like arbitrary numbers, and you need to find little ways to like break out of that cycle of do X on X round.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times if you slow down and just think about it, it makes sense. But
Yeah.
it's hard to make that. It's hard to actually do that sometimes in game because the game is so fast.
Yeah, for
There's
sure.
no break in TFT.
Exactly. Yep.
But I do want to mention earlier. I think on just the last stage, if I just took the time to scout, probably could have played a stronger board. Instead, I was mulling over whether I want to keep Kindred and Yumi on my bench.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, in hindsight, I could have just thought about that when the fight was going on. So it's actually really embarrassing.
Hey, it's see here's one of my biggest problems in TFT, right? So I'm a play-by-play caster, so I'm always watching the team fights and not thinking about anything else, and it's like just part of my brain. I can't avoid it. So I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm watching this and commentating on it, like I already can pinpoint a few things. Like for sure, next time I wouldn't think about the shop units until I focus on my board units.
Hmm.
Um, so that would make a humongous improvement off the bat. So
Hmm. Is
should have
that?
just done that earlier.
Do you feel like that's just a good general rule? Is focus on your board first and your shop second in a given round?
I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of different playstyles. For example,
Yeah.
a lot of players can roll down like a huge amount of gold very quickly. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like if you watch DQA, he can roll down like 100 gold in like 20 seconds, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I can't do that. So it depends on what's their strength and weaknesses. For a lot of
Okay.
people, doesn't they can focus on the sharpness, no problem. But for me, that's not the case.
That's interesting. I feel like I'm in a similar position too, where I'm definitely not as quick at rolling down. So it's better to just study the board, think about what you want to do with the board before you look at the shop. Because if you don't know what you want to do with your board, if you don't have that established, then what are you even going through the shop for? You know?
Yeah. So in this case, I go through my shop very quickly, immediately focus on my board again,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean right off the bat, the items are doomed. Like you can't build anything. I can't
Yeah.
build another QSS. I can't do anything. So then the strongest option I have is to probably build Dragon's Claw and Thief's Gloves, which
Right.
I have to because my board is so weak.
Yeah, makes sense. So 41 gold at 4-1, you've gone for level 7. You still got a pretty good amount of gold. What level are you thinking of going 8 now?
I think I mean with how weak my board is, I have to either all in at 4-1
Mm-hmm.
or all in at 4-5. I think I have to because my board is very very weak. I mean I'm winning this fight, but like without a doubt my board is very very weak.
Yeah, and
I have one last hope, which is on 4-3 the carousel. I can hit something relevant and Nico it, but that's not my only hope of being able to maybe go 8 on 5-1.
right. Because if you're, and are you still thinking that you're tunneling on Tryndamere right now? I know you've got the items on your bench, but is that's still the primary plan? Is it
Yeah
still
yeah yeah. I'm,
Tryndamere or
I'm hard
die?
tunneling on Tryndamere.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So in that case, you would never want to roll down a 4-1 because you're just not going to find it. You have to go 4-5, right?
No, no, no. 4-1, I have a super high chance of finding it.
Oh, I guess because
Rolling
of
a
the Nikos.
4-1,
Because of the Nikos, yeah.
yeah, rolling a 4-1 right here is, I mean, arguably correct.
Okay.
It just depends on, I mean, I'm
Yeah, I
looking
forgot
at
about
it in
the Nikos for a
hindsight, it
second.
was probably the correct move.
Yeah.
But I think at the time, I just, maybe either didn't have the APM or was too hard stuck on my items.
Hmm.
But rolling a 4-1 right there was probably the correct move.
Now,
It's a mistake, but it's not a big one.
am I correct when I say it would be the correct move because you've got a Nikos help? It would not be the correct move if you did not have a Nikos help?
Yeah, probably. That's probably my thinking as well.
Okay.
But without Nico's help, this game is, I mean, very, very doomed. It's in a
Yeah,
really, really bad spot.
for sure.
Um, yeah.
Hmm. Not really.
But
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
was gonna
with
say.
the, I was gonna say that if I didn't get this Nico's help, I'd probably have around 20 more gold. So maybe it wouldn't be as doomed as I would think.
No, that's true. That's true.
So this is some opportunity cost as well.
That's true. All right. It was funny seeing you like kind of agonize over the kale for a second too, because it's like, well, it's a kale, but it's like you really just don't have the items to support it.
Yeah, I would never
Yeah.
play Kale here ever.
Yeah. All right.
But
So.
I do. I mean, at this point, I do know. I do remember. I was like, okay, this is like full panic mode. What am I gonna do? You know, there's not much I can do.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't hit, I think I lose the game. So I do plan out my transition one more time on this carousel because I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly which units that I'm tunneling for. So during this carousel, I study my board. I first get my item and I spend the rest of the time studying my board.
Yeah, because
And
you.
right here,
All right.
I
Let's.
actually picked.
I'm gonna pause it when we go back to your board for a second, and we're gonna go through. All right. So. Oh.
No, I actually picked Aatrox 2.
Oh. Okay.
Not just because not for its like items, just because it's an Aatrox 2, so that I can help. It helps me stabilize in a turn which I'm already so frantic in.
Yeah.
So like 100%, I'm gonna make this Aatrox 2. I'm gonna sell this Braum and put the item on Aatrox 2. Not because it's a super strong item, Trap Class is a super strong item,
Right.
but because it's gonna be so frantic. I just want to know privately what I'm doing. So look, I already mapping out exactly which units I'm selling with my mouse.
So I'm
And I
gonna
just do it.
pause right here. Okay. So take us through real quick. What's the plan?
Oh, I mean for sure. Okay, I made my Aatrox 2. I'm selling the Braum to put the thing on Aatrox. That's probably the first thing I do.
Right.
And then sell my Diana, sell my Akali. The Pike doesn't get sold because it's a Slayer.
Yeah.
And then the Wukong probably gets sold, but I probably don't even it's a little bit far from my mouse. So I don't think I spend the time selling it. And then
Okay.
immediately level to 8, and then immediately start rolling and putting in all the units. I think the the moment I hit a chosen that's relevant,
Hmm.
I play it and then immediately focus on my board.
Okay, well
And then
let's watch that happen while you keep talking about it. Go for it.
actually, okay, I also say that sometimes people get stuck with like optimal carry items and stuff. I don't even think about that. I just um you know put items on my units. Doesn't really matter.
Hmm. As long as they're pretty good. Oh, there was a big hit. All right, so you hit
Yeah, that's
Dragon
a
Soul
very quick
Olaf.
hit.
Yeah, that's massive. So that helps a lot. All right, and there
And
you have it.
I make a key mistake here. I make a key mistake here though.
What's that?
It's that I mean, I know for sure I should have sold this Wukong, right? So earlier I should have sold this Wukong, but because I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
I had to take the time to put in Darius over Wukong, which didn't do anything. But if imagine
Mm,
if I sold this Wukong, it would have been very obvious to me what I needed to put in on that board, which is Braum.
right, because it would
But
have been.
because I had to go through the mental like exercise of it's like, oh well, do I have an extra unit? Yes, I do. If I had just sold that Wukong in the first place, I would have not lost this fight. I would have won this fight. So
Interesting.
that was a mistake right there.
Okay.
And that mistake could have been preemptively solved if instead of selling 3 units, I sold 4 units. So I feel really stupid about it, but it's okay. I mean, I think that's the first thing I do. Put in, yeah,
Yeah. Because now I think about it, because obviously that gets you 4 Vanguard and it gets you Dragon Soul, which is pretty nice in this situation.
yeah. And right now I'm still really weak.
Hmm.
Despite this board looking kind of strong. The reason why I'm weak is that my actual damage dealing unit is 1 star. Olaf doesn't do damage, um, unless he high rolls pocket items. I mean, sorry,
Right. On the Thieves'
Thief
Gloves
Gloves
items,
items.
yeah.
So I'm still really weak. I probably donkey roll every turn for Tryndamere too.
Yep. Because you kind of need Tryndamere too, otherwise it's going to end up being a very mediocre board. So right now, last game at this point you were thinking about first. This game, are you thinking more about just like top four, or do you still believe you can win it?
No, I mean right here is for sure. I'm just hoping for like a 6th or 7th.
Yeah. Okay.
But real quick before we continue with that is
Hmm.
that I got a lot of questions. I think I wasn't reading chat, but I think when I was rewatching the VOD, a lot of people were like, "Oh, why is it not IE on Tryndamere? Why is it not IE on your 2 star chosen Olaf? Right?
Hmm.
Like, why am I putting IE plus QSS on Tryndamere instead?"
Okay. Yeah. Why is that?
And I mean that's because Olaf isn't very good with Infinity Edge. Tryndamere often hits the backlines units,
Right.
so
That makes sense.
Tryndamere's just better with Infinity Edge.
Okay. Yeah.
In fact,
Makes.
it's just not very good to put items on Olaf right now in general. You want items on like Locket and like Zeke's on him.
Hmm.
You don't really want items on Olaf.
That's what I've kind of been noticing is more and more when people like play that 3 Slayer late game, it's going to be Tryndamere and Samira that are kind of the receivers of the big items, and Olaf just kind of gets whatever.
Yeah.
Interesting, because there was a time when he was kind of like the carry for a little while, for like a week or two, basically earlier in the
Yeah,
meta.
that's because back when Rune Striking was
Yeah,
too common. Yeah.
exactly. It's hard for people to get rid of that though. Get rid of that mindset. There's a
But
Tryndamere. Okay, that's
I
big.
mean, for the rest of the game, I think it's just all positioning and all like. There's no real decision making anymore. It's just all positioning and all luck from ore items.
Well, let's talk about the positioning then. So aura items wise, you for Trinity, obviously you didn't get any aura items with this Thieves Gloves, but you did get pretty good Olaf items in general. Giant Slayer Titans is pretty awesome. But first of all, what's the general positioning thought process for this board? What are the general things you want to keep in mind?
Okay, let's start with some of them like more easy, obvious ones.
Hmm.
For sure, Olaf wants to get the Dragon Soul buff every fight, right? So
Right.
I just put my Braum in the very back. It doesn't really matter if he blocks any damage, as long as he doesn't get the Dragon Soul buff, that's a win. And then Aatrox gets all my items, he's tanky enough to tank a lot of damage. So you just put him on the side, so that he soaks up the damage, pulls the carry, soaks up more damage, pulls the carry.
Right. Because that's what
And then
that's.
Jax.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say Jax on the other side because Jax can stall for a very very long time.
Wow, that was a nice Ornn item.
Yeah, and then the last thing is Tryndamere usually wants to go in the middle. That's because basically, uh, in my opinion, Tryndamere a middle allows him to spin to the backline units more reliably. But
Hmm.
yeah, one more thing about Tryndamere, I just want to touch on real quick is that for some reason every single person has this conception that he spins to the farthest unit. Misconception. That's been long changed. He actually spins to the biggest clump.
Hmm.
So you can actually outplay Tryndamere very very easily. For example, if he, I mean this fight his kill was untouched, but if you want to make sure his KO was untouched, you can put KO all the way in one corner and put the rest of your units on the other corner, and Tryndamere will never spin onto the KO. So
Interesting. Okay, because not maybe not as many people know this about you, but one thing that you've always been really interested in and shared a lot in the community, I think of your RE guide when I think of this is positioning. You've always gone like really deep into positioning compared to some of the other pros in the scene. Do you find, excuse me, do you find that's something that's like of special interest to you, or is it just something you notice that you feel like not a lot of other people are noticing?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think pretty sure every single high challenger player has their own nuances. It's
Mm-hmm.
just really hard to explain it. It's not like it's not like one of those things where like you just talk about it on stream for fun.
Yeah,
Nobody ever
everyone.
talks about it. Nobody ever asks, so you never talk about it. So
Yeah, makes sense.
I personally think every single player thinks about it a lot. But
Probably.
I mean, it's just hard to prove. I personally, like I said, I would say like of the top 100 players, I would say 80% of them are actually positioning gods. You just don't know about
All right, because that's the thing is when you play a game at a very high level like that, a lot of things that seem like second nature to you because you've just you've kind of discovered them organically, you've just kind of been doing them for a long time, seem like these big revelations to the plebs below, you know.
it. Yeah.
So, but it is interesting to think about, and I think certain pros do have sort of specialties, you know, and I do think one of your specialties is more intricate positioning things than the average pro player would include in their play. I will
I mean, I
say that.
appreciate
I
it.
feel like I've noticed that, but
I want to point out a mistake here. I think
yeah.
right here I take Zephyr over maybe like in this case a Dragon Soul spat or maybe a GA for my Lee Sin.
Hmm.
In hindsight, like it was probably not a mistake, but when I was picking it, I realized that it probably is a mistake. Like basically when I was picking, I was like, oh shit, this is a huge mistake. But in hindsight, the Zephyr was way stronger. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the later the game goes, the stronger the Zephyr generally gets. Is
I
that
know,
right?
but like
Yeah,
basically the argument is Lee Sin with GA is such a game-changing item for Lee Sin, right?
for sure. Yeah,
Like
guarantees him the punch most rounds.
yeah, but I mean in hindsight, I was thinking about it. I mean the reason why I took the Zephyr was because Morgana was such the anti-composition for me. If I even fight a Morgana, I instantly lose.
Hmm.
So I wanted the Zephyr for the Morgana matchup.
Right, that makes sense.
And then the other thing that I realized is that Lee Sin, I mean, everyone memes about how strong Lee Sin is. Lee Sin is actually kind of a weak unit. It's actually not very good. Um, I mean, like putting Lee Sin, the G on your Lee Sin is kind of it's kind of throwing away an item most of the times.
Hmm.
He's okay. Like sometimes in the fights where he's okay, he's like you always think that this Lee Sin's amazing because he's like kicking off a unit,
Right.
but like he's not very good.
I mean,
I'm sure he's not very good.
I'd be inclined to agree with you. I actually am not a I've actually never been a big fan of using him because it seems like sometimes, once he sometimes does punch the person you want, sometimes he punches him once and he goes to the back line and he gets distracted by something else and turns away from them. So there's just a lot of things that can sort of derail Lee Sin from doing, what you want to do with him. So I've always been kind of hesitant at using him, but he is the popular meta champ at the moment, that's for sure.
I mean, it's one of those champions where like he
That was a
seems
good
like he's doing a
Zephyr.
lot, but anyways,
Yeah.
this Zephyr on Morgana instantly wins me the fight. Without this Zephyr on Morgana, I get stuck on it forever, and
Hmm.
Tryndamere never reaches KO. For example, I'm sorry, Olaf never reaches KO, for example, and then my Tryndamere's attack is halved, and then everything goes downhill from there, and plus every single Slayer gets their healing reduced by half.
Right.
So the Zephyr for Slayers is super 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 important for just the sole purpose of targeting Morgana, nothing else. And every single fight that you haven't fought the Morgana player, you should spend all your effort targeting that Morgana. Honestly,
That's the board you're gonna want to watch the most, huh?
yeah, yes. And I
Hmm.
mean, I didn't do a good job this game, but intuitively, I know that.
A gold collector is obviously a great item for Samira, but it looks like you're hesitant to put her in over the Pike too.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, like even if I got Samir too, it was wrong to put it over Pike 2. In hindsight, so I
Uh
probably should have just put this collector on someone else, maybe
okay.
like Warren or something. I'm not sure. I can always put it. I can almost always put it on Braum because Braum never dies.
True, true.
But
All right.
like in hindsight, I'm pretty sure the Pike is just better. Period. Oh well.
And I suppose you also kind of thinking that the Frozen Heart is pretty decent for Pike as well, or where would you put that on? Would you just throw it on the Sejuani at this point in the game, or would you actually put it on the
No,
Pike?
I mean, If Frozen Heart, you should definitely put on Lee Sin because he
Hmm.
wants the mana, right? He
Oh
wants the
yeah, that's
mana and
true.
he
That's
wants the
true.
tankiness.
That's a good
It
point.
doesn't really matter about which unit gets slowed down because a lot of times that unit would either be surrounded or have QSS anyways. So if you look at around, like almost every single unit has QSS or is surrounded. And the Frozen Heart is just a really bad item in general. So you just use it for the stats.
Okay. So up
Oh
against
yeah, but yeah, I do
TQA.
remember every single fight I'm trying to target at the Morello user. Because Morello is actually the complete game changer for a Slayer fight.
Right. It kind of turns off one of the big buffs from Slayers in that it really nerfs your healing.
And then like even talking about this, like earlier I was like, oh, it's definitely wrong to not pick up GA, but like no, it's definitely correct to not pick up GA.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could just realize this, I'd be a lot better player, like But actually, it took a long time, and like playing at the highest level to actually understand
Hey, I
this.
mean, if you're gonna start doing it, this is a good time to do it
Yeah.
in a tournament like this. Definitely when you want to start making those decisions. It's not having the Samira 2 right now. It feels like that's a big point of frustration.
No, I mean in hindsight, I should just sold it. In
Yeah.
hindsight, yeah, in hindsight, I just don't think it's good. I don't think that unit is very very good in my comp, especially because I can't fit in sharpshooters anyway. There's no way.
Okay.
So I would never actually play it.
Hmm.
If I could go back in hindsight, see, I target the Morello user every single fight, and
Yep.
that's such a big difference.
Oh, it's huge.
Every
Yeah.
single fight, every single fight, that's probably the difference between winning and losing.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely seems that way because every single time the morale doesn't go off. Obviously, in this case, it was Yone ultimate that got used super late, and by then it's too late. The whole team is dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So when you say you should sell the Samira and not put that in there, the Pike is better. It's a 2-star Pike, which is nice, but it's a 2-star 2 cost, of course. But he also provides that crowd control. Is that kind of the main reason why you want to keep it in?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, for sure, two-star Samira has to be better later into the future.
You would think so? Yeah.
I'm talking about like not right now, but let's just say I get one more item from Carousel, one more item from Creep Round. At that point, Samira has to be better, right? It has to be. But until then, the Pike has to be better.
Right.
So basically, like the idea of Samira is, are you gonna invest into your late game, or are you gonna invest into right now?
Mm-hmm.
And I should have realized to invest in right now over late game. Did I hit the Morgana? Oh my god! Holy shit! I am
Wow.
such a high roll. Wow! Oh my god! This Zephyr has gotten his value in gold.
Seriously.
Wow! I'm actually really impressed. I must have scouted like a god this game.
You definitely were doing some scouting for sure, but it's a close lobby. This is a high sweat situation, right, where the HP is really close. You realize that you do have a chance for first now after like frankly a really really rough mid game, and here
Yeah.
you are. You've got a chance to do it, and you're pulling off. You're in that zone that you're talking about right now. I'm sure.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you mean though, where it's like you're playing in a very difficult, very high pressure situation, but suddenly you just kind of like enter the state of calm and your brain just says, I can do this.
I mean, I'm Neo from the Matrix. I see literally
Yeah.
every single Morello on the board at the same time.
No, it's totally true. Like, I mean, obviously I haven't competed at quite the highest level, but I've been competing in like card game tournaments and things like that for years and years, and a couple video game tournaments. I played on a team in Hearthstone in Korea for like a little while, and so there are those moments where it's like, yeah, you just feel like your brain just knows that for whatever reason, for that match, for that next period of minutes in that game, you are not going to make any mistakes. You're going to hit everything perfectly, and you're just going to see it all. It does feel like you're suddenly Neo. It's a great feeling. I miss it. Winter, you got great Ord items, by the way. Like, I mean, Gold Collector, whatever, but like everything else has been S tier.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think Gold Collector could have been S tier if I used it properly. I mean, I don't even know which unit to put it on still, though.
I mean, Samir is really good, right?
Yeah, it might have been Sejuani as well. I mean, I can't play Samira, right? I can't ever play Samira.
I
I
mean,
think I
just
could have gone
in general,
Gold
like,
Collector value.
I was just saying, like in general, what units tend to use Gold Collector really well.
I mean, in this case, it was probably Sejuani. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
I don't really know. Maybe Lee Sin. I don't really know.
It's
Like I
it's
said,
tough.
it's probably like a tanky unit,
Yeah.
um, as opposed to a Pike. But yeah, like even now, I would never put in Pike. I would never put in Samira right here.
Hmm.
So like just holding the Samira probably griefed my econ, and like I should have realized I was never gonna get a 3 item Samira in the first place, and then not just not played it in the first place.
Well, the nice
I'd
thing,
probably have, since I was holding it for 5 or 6 rounds, probably have 5 or 6 more gold right now.
true. Yeah, and sometimes that does make the difference. It's I do like this little addition late game of Cultist because it's, Galio obviously is not going to do a whole lot. He's going to get almost insta give, but that tiny little CC can sometimes be pretty helpful. This round
I do
though,
agree.
looking a bit rough.
Oh no, this round is because I didn't. I mean, I got bad Olaf items, but more importantly, I think Morgana ended up getting targeted right off the bat,
Yeah,
and then completely running rampant on my team.
there it is. So do you swap now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had to swap now,
It's Samir too.
but
Yeah.
even now, I don't think it's actually much stronger.
Okay.
And then here I was debating on whether to put in Sharpshooter or Yone. If I didn't, if I didn't have the Black Cleaver, I'll put in the Yone for sure. But with the Black Cleaver, I was thinking I had enough Shred. But Yone Shred is 60%, while Black Cleavers is only 40%. So it's actually very close.
Right. If the Yone gets the ultimate off, then it's super good. You just
And
have
then
to make
this,
sure he does.
and then the other thing is that this Sivir actually doesn't make a big impact onto my team. I guess it does give me Cultist, I think, which is a bigger impact. But Sharpshooter for Samira is really really strong, but it's actually really hard for the Samira to go off. I think,
Okay. Hey.
especially against the other enemy team who I think is a talent player. Um, oh, I ended up putting a Vanguard spat. That's what made the difference.
Right.
Why I wanted to play, yeah. But otherwise, it's actually very, very, very difficult for this Samir to go off. I
The
probably should have put her in front of Braum, actually.
Oh, Morellos. Does that hit it? Oh, not quite. Okay, so you didn't
No,
connect
but
with the
that's also
Morellos that
very
time.
good, though.
The Shen is
Because
really good. Yeah.
yeah, because that actually allows my Olaf to get into the back line.
The funny thing is, I remember casting this game actually, and I said the exact same thing, that like the Zephyr on the Shen was huge because it gave you that backline access really really fast. Yeah, I remember this game now. Yep.
Hey, if we can go back really
And that was
quickly.
enough. Yeah, we can.
Does the talent jump on my Samira right off the bat? I just want to know what to do better next time. I think
Let's go back a little bit farther.
it
All right.
probably does, right? That's my guess. Which
Let's
is if I put my both my Sivir and my Samira in front of my Braum, there's actually no way that talent can actually kill my Braum in time to actually do anything relevant. So if I just did that, the fight wouldn't even be close.
Okay.
Let me just make sure that this. My guess is talent probably jumps on Sivir, kills Sivir, and jumps on like Lee Sin or something like that.
Okay, so here we go. So here's where we're at. We've
Oh,
got.
he doesn't have talent. Oh, that's right.
There's no talent over there. Yeah.
Oh, so, okay. I was thinking about some other.
Like you're trolling me, man.
Oh, okay.
But it is true
yeah,
where you do see the Zephyr lifting up the Shen, and that just lets your Slayers walk back and start hitting the back line. And by the time Shen comes down, he gets one taunt on the Aatrox, and that's all the Shen accomplishes. So the Zephyr, I think, definitely the game winning move there.
Yeah. I think the Zephyr ended up being a game changer.
For sure.
Okay. For some reason, I thought he was playing talent because he was playing Morgana.
Well, it makes sense. Two peas in a pod, those two, All right, we're back. That was an exciting game. And as we were making the transition, you said something also very interesting about watching your own games back again. Would you repeat that, please?
Oh, yeah. I'll say that sometimes I watch my games just to see what mistakes I make. But when I'm watching, I mean, I feel like I'm not actually learning that much. But being able to commentate over the game, with someone else, like in this case, Doa, I realized that, a lot of the decisions I make are not fully fleshed out. Like, why I take that Zephyr over the GA, in hindsight, it was the correct play. But at the time, I had no idea. So being able to, identify exactly what makes you, win or lose the game via commentating, it can improve your game a lot.
No, you're totally true. And it's, you're totally right. It is interesting because, obviously as a speaking from the casting perspective, I go back and review my own games, and I review pro player games and things like that. But it really is talking through it with someone else that makes you learn the most, because you don't just look at something and then think a statement to yourself and be like, well, I wonder if that's it. It sounds right. You say it out loud, and then you have to justify it to the other person. And in the process of justifying it and explaining it, it kind of makes you think about alternatives more, and it kind of makes you think through the process more fully. So yeah, I think it's always better to do that kind of thing, with a partner. You tend to learn a lot more when you're forced to justify it, right?
Yeah, and then you start thinking about weird things as well. I just during some of the downtime when the other person's talking, because it's when someone else is talking, it kind of generates your brain cells as well.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
While you were talking, I realized that like Zephyr to counter the counter to Slayers is so obvious. Like basically every single person in EU and like top of NA builds Morellos to counter Slayers. Everyone knows
Hmm.
that, right?
Yeah,
Like
of course.
Morellos is OP because of counter Slayer. But because Morellos is OP to counter Slayer, why don't you just build a Zephyr to counter the counter to Slayers? And no one ever moves a Morello unit. Like why would you do that? You always move your carry.
Uh-huh.
Who the hell has the APM to move their Morgana or their Yone? So like you can always hit the Morello user.
Yeah. Or like the Kennen comps right now. Obviously, the Kennen is not going to be shifting around because you've got the whole big clump of keepers to move along with that. So, yeah, it's a good point. Yep.
So maybe like when you're playing Slayers, it's actually probably like super important to build a Zephyr.
Hmm.
I mean, something I never even thought of before, honestly. But like,
See,
it kind of makes sense.
that's the beauty of the show. See, everybody's learning things. I learned a lot. You learned something. It's a very educational time.
Yeah.
At the end of all this, I would say out of the two games we watched, what are the two big takeaways? Give me like one takeaway for each game, as far as like if you could say something that either something you realized while we were watching it that impacted you the most, or something about those games that you think would impact people that are trying to improve at TFT out there. Just whatever two
Um.
main points you can glean from those two games we watched.
Yeah. Before I get to the first too many points, I just wanted to take an opportunity to be able to talk through some of the things that I don't really get an opportunity to talk to ever.
Okay,
It's just
great.
you never have a platform to talk about this.
Yeah.
So I think this show is actually a great platform to dive into something that's too difficult to describe via Twitch chat because of the short attention span.
Right.
So this is really
Well,
helpful.
this is a show for the hardcore, so yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, and it's definitely a hardcore TFT if you want to improve.
Yeah.
And like, if you don't want to improve in TFT, you probably shouldn't watch this honestly because it's just too much and it's too boring.
This show, that's the thing. Like I don't care. I'm not out to get likes. I'm not out to, be the big influencer. I just want to make a show content for the most hardcore of the hardcore. So that's what we do here. So yeah, what do you got?
Uh, yeah, that's definitely okay. But anyways, the key takeaways I would say is that the first game, um, based on the items, since I wasn't playing frontline, I wanted to play a front-loaded damage based KO build,
Hmm.
which people, for some reason don't really understand what that means.
Yeah.
Which is play like since you don't have a front line, try to stack your KO with as much front-loaded damage and try to annihilate the fight within like 10 or 15 seconds
Hmm.
before the enemy even can respond. So like like I said, front-loaded damage items are stuff like Giant Slayer, um, Joe Gauntlet, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then for the second game, I mean, um, I would say since I had the gold early on, try to force a comp, so which allows you to save HP, and it allows you to mass gold, so that when you transition, you can actually hit your comp 100% of the times. And then obviously the takeaway of using Zephyr to not hit their carry units, but hit their Morello user
Hmm.
is more important in Slayer.
Okay. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And the thing for me too, like when you said front loaded and like back loaded kale, for a second I was like not sure what you were talking about, and then I realized, and I was like, oh, it's like something that we think about, but it's not something that's articulated that often. It's not something that's really broken down that often. But I think that's hugely helpful for people that want to play Kale. And man, I feel like every other game I'm finding myself playing Kale. It's just the way that you tend to trend a lot of times if you're familiar with the build to a little bit of degree and you're playing flexibly. Kale becomes an option a lot, right? So, but that's really interesting. Is how you play Kale, and really how you play a lot of different comps is really dependent on how the flow of the game is going. For instance, if we look at the second game, we talked about Slayers as well. You brought up that Olaf isn't itemized optimally that often anymore. It's more the Tryndamere, and then if you have the luxury of doing it, the Samira a little bit later. And it's just kind of like the nature of the way the comp operates on the board. Tryndamere has become more important over time than Olaf.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm glad you got those takeaways as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like my brain has grown 3 sizes today. It's like the Grinch, but it's my brain instead of my heart. But hey, my brain's gonna help me more at TFT anyway, so that's the best thing I want to have grow out of this show, right? So, all right,
I think
oh,
that's
good.
the I mean if I could reiterate that takeaway is
Yeah.
that I mean like that's I mean that's why I think I'm the best player TFT player of all time because a lot of people who think about this kind of stuff they try to think out think of it as a very surface level. It's like a composition.
Yeah.
You play KO and you play frontline. But like, why do those things work together in the way that they do?
Hmm.
They don't really think about that. It's just like taking like the 2 seconds after a fight to see like why something happened in the way that it did. Can actually improve your gameplay a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And this is the reason why I love TFT, actually. Why I honestly have not gotten this deep into a game since StarCraft, since like StarCraft 2, because there's so many core concepts in StarCraft that translate to TFT. There's the surface stuff like, early game, middle game, late game that all need to be played very differently each game, depending on what build you're going for. There's compositions, just like build orders. You do have to have a decent amount of APM, honestly. There's a lot of fast decision making. There's a lot of scouting that goes into it. And all of these things are always nuanced. Whenever somebody asks me, oh, what's good, what comp is good in TFT? And I always say, like, well, every time you talk about something being good in TFT, good or bad in TFT, you always have to put an if at the end of it, because there's always a context around it, where something that could be terrible in one game is amazing in another game and vice versa, right? And there's not really any other individually played esport right now, as in like you're the person, you're not on a team, you're the one person playing it. There's no other game really that I can think of right now that is so complex and so demanding of your brain every single second of the time you're playing it than TFT, and that's why I love it so much.
Yeah, I agree. But one other shout out, like one other game shout out I want to say is,
Hmm.
this we're talking about this and talking about how games are really demanding. Where I learned this front loaded back-loaded damage idea is from Slay the Spire. There's this very
Hmm.
famous streamer called Jorbs.
Okay.
It's a Slay the Spire main, and I don't know if you know Slay the Spire, but it's essentially like a deck building game.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Yeah,
And
not
like
super
prior to
familiar.
watching Jorbs, I always built these really traditional, like, oh, if I'm building a poison deck, I should only build poison cards.
Hmm.
If I'm building a Shiv deck, I should only build Shiv cards. But he broke down. I mean, I watch all of Jorbs stuff, like not so much anymore, but like back in the days, and he thinks about the game. Like if I thought about the game of TFT in a different level, he thinks about the game of Slayer Spire on a different level relative to me thinking about TFT on a different level.
He's like
But
ascended to the third tier.
he's like essentially the person who like founded the terms front loaded damage and back loaded damage that like I'm essentially basing off of my ideas on. So like
Interesting.
he's like grandfather of front loaded damage and back loaded damage, you know?
Dude, I love that, because like I love taking concepts from other games and like applying them to the game that you're playing. And I feel like I've done that a lot with StarCraft, but that's interesting that we've got like other influences in that too. And I think it just all comes down to strategy games, right? It just comes down to like the big brain stuff. Oh no, here come the police. We're too smart. They're coming for us. No, it's just by very thin walls, and there's a hospital like right over there. But anyway, I don't know if you could hear that on the stream, but it was very loud in my ears. But anyway, yeah, taking concepts from other games and bringing them into the game that you're working on in some capacity, either as a pro player or a caster, is always really interesting. When I was, this is kind of a digression, but when Monty and I were trying to figure out how to cast Overwatch, we actually took a lot of our cues from fighting game commentators, because we were like, all
Mm.
right, well, here's a game where there is action 110% of the time. There's never downtime. So we need to look at other existing esports and people that are commentating those that have 100% action all the time, to figure out how you cast something like that. And so we watched like a lot of Street Fighter commentators, Smash commentators, especially a lot. And then kind of we tried to model our commentary based on fighting game commentators, which, and then, adapt it as we got going as casters. But, it's just really cool. You can kind of take concepts from other games and apply them to other ones. But I digress. Back to TFT. Did you have any other final points you wanted to talk to before we close it out?
No, I think that's about it. It's
Okay.
actually pretty fun and surprisingly, I actually learned a lot too. Like I said,
Awesome.
didn't think I was gonna learn this much. I definitely thought, it was more of a, but I actually feel a lot more ready for the upcoming tournament just by talking about my own gameplay. So
Wow, that's great to hear. That's so cool, actually, that you said that, because this is really the essence of why I'm doing the show, is because I feel like there's a space for very deep, very hardcore TFT content that, like, only the most hardcore of hardcore fans will latch onto. And if other people want to watch it too, that's great. The more the merrier. But it really is I want to make something for the most hardcore, right? So it's great to hear one of the best players out there, if not the self-proclaimed best player in TFT, Mismatched Socks, saying exactly that. So before we go, do you have any final shout outs to make?
I don't think so. I think that's about it.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been awesome. I think this might have been my favorite episode yet. Um, we'll have to have you back on in the future for sure. Good luck this weekend in the upcoming tournament. Going to be watching those games very eagerly. Until then, I guess that's the end of this show. Thanks for watching, everybody. Do all the social stuff, like, subscribe. You know how it goes. Do all that stuff. We'll see you next time for more Galaxy Brain. Until then, take care. GG's. See you next time.